My dad told me to man up after my wife cheated, so I ghosted the entire family and let them watch me succeed from a distance. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and until 2 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I'd built the kind of life people are supposed to envy: a good job, a stable home, and a wife everyone seemed to adore. On paper, it looked perfect. In reality, it was the kind of quiet illusion that cracks the moment you stop pretending. I grew up in a house where emotions weren't welcome. My dad believed tears were a form of weakness, and talking about feelings was something only soft men did. Every argument, every loss, every heartbreak in our family was handled with the same 3 words: man up, son. My mom, gentle but silent, lived like an echo in his shadow. She didn't disagree. She just folded laundry and kept her eyes on the floor whenever Dad spoke like his word was law. So when I met Emily, I thought I was finally doing everything right. She was confident, bright, the kind of woman who lit up a room without trying. My parents adored her instantly. My dad would say, "Now that's a strong woman, none of that dramatic nonsense." I remember feeling proud that I'd found someone who fit perfectly into the image he respected. We built a small home together. Neat, practical, safe. I worked long hours to keep it that way. Emily would post pictures of our life online, the smiling couple in coordinated outfits, and people would comment, "You two are goals." I believed them. I wanted to believe them, but somewhere along the way, something shifted. Emily's smile started to feel rehearsed, her touch colder. My father's calls became shorter, less warm, as if I'd failed some unspoken test. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it. That strange, quiet distance creeping into both my marriage and my family. And for the first time, I didn't know how to fix it. It started with little things, the kind you brush off until they pile up and crush you. Emily began working late more often, coming home with half-hearted excuses about urgent reports or client dinners. I wanted to trust her. I did trust her. But every night I sat alone at the kitchen table, watching the clock tick past midnight. Something inside me started whispering that I shouldn't. One night, when I asked if everything was okay, she sighed like my concern was an inconvenience. "You always assume the worst, Mark," she said, rubbing her temples. "Can you just let me breathe for once?" Her tone was sharper than I'd ever heard. I laughed it off, pretending I was overreacting, because that's what I'd been taught to do. When I mentioned it to my dad the next morning, he didn't even look up from his coffee. "You're being emotional again," he said flatly. "Women need space. Focus on your work. That's what matters." I remember sitting there, gripping the mug so tight I thought it might crack. My mom, standing at the sink, caught my eye but said nothing. Just that same quiet stare that said, "Don't argue with him," so I pushed it down. I convinced myself Emily was just stressed. I picked up extra shifts to ease her load, thinking it would bring us closer again. But every time I came home, the space between us felt wider. She'd be on her phone, screen tilted away, muttering about deadlines. The scent of her perfume, once my favorite, now felt foreign, almost artificial. Then one evening, as she turned off her phone mid-notification, I caught a flicker of panic cross her face. It was gone in a second, replaced by that same cold composure. "Just work stuff," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes, but the whisper inside me grew louder. Something was wrong, and pretending otherwise was starting to feel like lying to myself. It happened on a night I'll never forget. One of those evenings that change you in ways you can't undo. Emily had gone to grab drinks with coworkers. I stayed home, finishing a client report for the morning meeting. Around 10:30, I walked past the kitchen counter and saw her phone buzzing, screen lighting up with a name I didn't recognize. Daniel from marketing. At first, I told myself not to look. I could already hear my dad's voice in my head. "Don't go snooping, boy. Real men trust their women." But the phone kept buzzing. And something, maybe instinct, maybe exhaustion, pushed me to pick it up. The screen was full of messages. Explicit ones, pictures, words no husband should ever have to see written by his wife. My chest went cold. My legs felt weak. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the screen, reading her laughing replies, her heart emojis, her plans to meet him again. When she walked in an hour later, humming like nothing had happened, I could barely breathe. "How were drinks?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She froze mid-step. "Fine," she said too quickly. "Why?" I held up her phone. "You want to try that again?" Her face drained of color. For a second, she looked sorry. Then something darker took over. "If you hadn't been so emotionally distant," she snapped, "maybe I wouldn't have needed to talk to someone else." I stood there in silence, my mind splitting between rage and disbelief. "You cheated," I whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it real. But she just crossed her arms. "You're overreacting." "It's not a big deal. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, but I didn't. I remembered my father's words, the unspoken rule of my entire life. Man up. Don't lose control." So I didn't. I just walked out into the night, my hands shaking, heart numb, wondering how everything I'd built had turned to ash in a single evening. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house because I didn't know what else to do. I hadn't slept. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire drive. The image of those messages burned into my head like a brand I couldn't escape. I wasn't looking for advice. I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. When I walked in, my mom was at the stove making breakfast. She looked up, immediately sensing something was wrong. "Mark, honey, what happened?" she asked softly. I didn't even answer her. I just blurted it out. "Emily cheated on me." She froze, spatula hovering in midair. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. Before she could say anything more, my dad walked in, newspaper under his arm, and asked what the commotion was about. "Emily's been seeing someone," I said quietly. "I found messages." He stared at me for a moment, then let out a long sigh, not of sympathy, but of irritation. "So what? You think you're the first man this happened to?" His tone was sharp, dismissive. "Man up, Mark, these things happen. You deal with it. Don't go making a scene." I blinked at him, thinking I'd misheard. "She cheated, Dad. She lied to me." "How can you say that?" He folded his paper with a shrug. "You've always been too sensitive. That's your problem. You're weak when it comes to women. Real men don't fall apart over this kind of thing." My mom reached for my arm, her eyes pleading silently for me not to argue, but something inside me cracked. "You don't get it," I said through clenched teeth. "She destroyed everything and you're telling me to just deal with it?" He didn't even flinch. "You'll thank me later for teaching you how the world works." That was the moment I realized I'd never find comfort here. Only judgment. I left without another word, the sound of my mother's quiet sobs fading behind me as I stepped out into the cold morning air. The days that followed were a blur of silence and anger. I moved into a small, half-furnished apartment near the industrial part of town, the kind of place where the walls hum with traffic and loneliness. My clothes stayed in boxes. The mattress lay on the floor. Every night I sat in the dark, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so fast I didn't tell anyone where I was. Emily called once, left a voicemail full of excuses and half-apologies. "You pushed me away, Mark. I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. I deleted it before she could finish. I wasn't ready to hear her twist the knife again. I tried therapy. Sat in a sterile office with a woman who asked gentle questions I didn't know how to answer. "How do you feel about what happened?" she asked. I stared at the floor. "I don't know how to feel." I'd spent my whole life being told not to feel. My dad's voice still haunted me. "Man up." "Stop whining." So I quit after 3 sessions. Told myself it was pointless. Most evenings, I'd sit by the window with a beer, watching headlights pass by, each one carrying someone home. Someone who wasn't me. The quiet was heavy. Sometimes I'd catch myself whispering, "What did I do wrong?" As if saying it out loud might conjure an answer. My mom called occasionally. Her words were soft but rehearsed. "You should talk to your father," she said once. "He only wants what's best for you." I laughed bitterly. "His version of best broke me." She didn't argue. She just sighed, the way she always did when she wanted to say more but didn't dare. For the first time in my life, I started to wonder if being alone was better than being surrounded by people who mistook silence for strength. 2 months later, I thought the worst was behind me. I'd stopped checking Emily's social media, stopped replaying arguments in my head. But peace has a way of slipping through your fingers when you least expect it. One afternoon, while scrolling online during lunch, I saw her face, smiling, glowing, in a post from one of our mutual friends. She was standing next to him. The coworker, his arm around her waist. The caption read, "So happy for these two." My stomach dropped. But what really broke me wasn't the photo. It was the comments. Among the likes and heart emojis was a familiar name. My dad. "Proud of you both," he'd written. "Always family." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so loud I could barely breathe. Always family? My father, the man who'd told me to man up and move on, was publicly supporting the woman who'd betrayed me. That single comment hurt more than the affair itself. It was confirmation of something I'd always suspected. My pain never mattered to him. I called my mom that night. She sounded hesitant, nervous. "He didn't mean it that way, Mark," she whispered.
You know your father.
"He just wants peace." "Peace?" I snapped. "By siding with my ex-wife?" There was silence. Then she said the words that pushed me over the edge. "You should come by for dinner. Emily might be there. We can talk this out like adults." That was it. The last straw. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just hung up, walked to my desk, and started typing my resignation letter. Within a month, I'd accepted a new job offer in another city. I deleted their numbers, packed my things, and disappeared without saying goodbye. As the highway lights blurred past that night, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't running. I was finally choosing myself. Moving to a new city felt like stepping into someone else's life. No memories, no ghosts, no eyes watching me fail. Just a small apartment with peeling paint, a mattress on the floor again, and silence that finally felt clean. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling judged. I threw myself into work. The new job demanded everything. Long hours, tough projects, relentless deadlines. It was exhausting, but it was mine. Every late night, I stayed behind to finish a project. I thought about how my dad used to mock people who worked for validation. He never understood that I wasn't chasing praise anymore. I was rebuilding from ashes. Little by little, things began to change. My manager noticed my focus, my dedication. I got promoted within 6 months. I started hitting the gym before work, not out of vanity, but because I liked the discipline. I watched my body get stronger while my mind grew quieter. Occasionally, my phone would light up with an unknown number. I never answered. I knew it was them, my parents, maybe even Emily, but I wasn't ready to let their voices back in. I didn't owe them my peace. Then, one night, as I walked home through the city, I passed a couple holding hands, laughing. For a moment, that old ache returned. The longing, the loneliness. But instead of breaking me, it grounded me. I realized I wasn't bitter anymore. Just healing. Slowly, silently, on my own terms, I'd vanished from their world completely. No updates, no posts, no explanations. And somehow, that silence felt louder than anything I could have said, because for the first time, I wasn't the man trying to prove himself. I was just a man learning to exist, and they'd have to live with wondering who I was becoming. 2 years passed before I even realized it. The man who once begged for scraps of approval had become a stranger to his old life. I'd built something real, a successful business consulting firm, small but thriving, with clients who trusted me and employees who respected me. My mornings started with quiet coffee on the balcony, sunlight spilling over the city skyline, instead of the dark silence of my childhood home. I didn't talk about my past. To my coworkers, I was just Mark, the guy who works too hard and never misses a deadline. But beneath that calm exterior was something deeper, a steady pride. Not arrogance, freedom. Then the past found me again. One afternoon, an email popped up from an address I hadn't seen in years, my mother. The subject line read, "Please call me." For a long time, I just stared at it. I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. Her message was short, hesitant. "Your father isn't well. He misses you, we both do. We've seen what you've achieved. Everyone talks about how successful you are. Please come home." I closed the laptop slowly. The words should have felt satisfying, proof that my silence had spoken louder than my pain. But instead I felt nothing, just a dull ache, because it wasn't pride that made them reach out. It was distance. Later that night, I checked social media out of pure impulse. My company's feature article, From Rock Bottom to Reinvention, had been shared everywhere. And there it was again, my father's name in the comments. Proud of my son? He's always been a fighter. I laughed out loud, not out of humor but disbelief. The same man who told me to man up when I was breaking now wanted to share in my victory. For the first time, I didn't feel angry, just detached. Because success, I realized, wasn't revenge. It was distance they couldn't cross anymore. For all the progress I'd made, there were nights when the loneliness hit harder than I wanted to admit. Success looked glamorous from the outside, the suits, the meetings, the travel, but no one saw the quiet that came after. The empty apartment, the untouched dinners, the silence that filled the space where family should have been. Some nights I'd scroll through old photos I never deleted. Emily laughing at a barbecue, my dad's arm around my shoulder at graduation, my mom smiling like everything was okay. It all looked so real, like a life that belonged to someone else. I wondered if I'd become too good at pretending I didn't care. Then one evening, after a brutal week at work, I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch, phone in hand. My father's number sat in my recent calls list. I must have saved it back when Mom emailed me. I hovered over it for a long time. Part of me wanted to call to finally say everything I never could, how his words broke me, how his indifference still echoed. But another part of me, the part that had rebuilt quietly and bled in silence, knew that no conversation would heal what years of coldness had created. I didn't need his validation anymore. I needed peace. I locked my phone and stared out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably having dinner in the same house I grew up in, pretending everything was fine. And maybe, for them, pretending was easier than admitting what they'd lost. The ache in my chest wasn't anger anymore. It was acceptance. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need them to understand. I just needed to keep walking forward, one quiet step at a time. Still, deep down I could feel something coming, like the universe wasn't done testing just how far I'd go to protect my peace. It happened on an ordinary morning. The kind where nothing feels remarkable until everything changes. My assistant burst into my office holding a copy of Forbes Weekly. "Mark, you're in it," she said, eyes wide. "They ran a feature on your turnaround story." I laughed, thinking she was exaggerating. But when I saw the headline, "Man who lost everything builds multi-million-dollar consulting firm from scratch," my throat tightened. They'd written about my journey, my fall, my silence. They didn't name names, but every word felt like a mirror of my life. By noon, my inbox flooded with messages. Old classmates, distant relatives, even people from my hometown, all congratulating me. But one message stopped me cold. A text from an unknown number. "We're proud of you, son." "Love, Dad." For a moment, I just stared at it. That word, love, from a man who'd never used it when it actually mattered. I almost didn't believe it was real until I saw the same thing online. My father, commenting under the article link shared by my mom. "That's my boy." Knew he'd make it. The irony hit like a punch. When I was broken, he told me to man up. When I was invisible, he looked away. But now that the world saw me as a success, he suddenly remembered how to be proud. That night, as the city lights flickered below my window, I opened the message again. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I typed out a dozen versions of what I wanted to say, everything from, "Where were you?" to, "You don't get to be proud of me now." But then I erased it all. Instead, I powered off my phone, poured a drink, and raised it to the silence that built me. Because the man he was proud of didn't exist because of him. He existed in spite of him. A few months later, life threw me an unexpected twist. My best friend, Jake, invited me to his wedding back in my hometown. At first, I declined. Going back there meant stepping into old ghosts, walking the same streets that once carried every version of me I'd tried to bury. But something inside me whispered that maybe it was time, not for them, for me. So I went. The drive back felt strange. Familiar roads, familiar smells, but I wasn't the same man who'd left them. When I arrived at the wedding venue, people I hadn't seen in years recognized me instantly. Some smiled politely, others whispered like they were seeing a ghost who'd come back richer, stronger, quieter. And then, across the crowd, I saw them. My parents. My mom froze the moment our eyes met, her hands clutching her purse like a lifeline. My dad stood beside her, older, grayer, but still carrying that same unshakable pride in his posture. He walked up first, a practiced smile on his face. "Son," he said as if no time had passed. "You turned out fine after all." I didn't respond right away. I just studied him. The man who taught me to hide my pain, who mocked my heartbreak, who stood beside my ex-wife as if she were still family.
Yeah, I finally said quietly.
Once I stopped listening to people who told me to man up, his smile faltered. The air between us went still, thick with everything we'd never said. My mom reached out to touch my arm, whispering, "He didn't mean to hurt you, Mark." I nodded slightly. Maybe, but he did. Then I turned and walked away, not with anger, but with the calm certainty that I didn't owe them forgiveness. Behind me, I could feel my father watching, silent for once. Maybe for the first time, he finally understood the power of my silence. That night, after the wedding ended and the laughter faded into the hum of crickets, I sat alone outside the venue under a string of dim lights. The sky was heavy and quiet, the kind of silence that used to scare me, but now it felt peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone's expectations. Not my father's idea of masculinity. Not my mother's quiet compliance. Not Emily's illusion of perfection. Just me, flawed, scarred, but whole. I thought about everything I'd lost. A marriage that was never real, a family that never knew how to love, a home that never felt safe. And yet somehow losing them gave me the life I was meant to have. I built peace from the wreckage they left behind. A few guests walked past waving goodbye, one of them saying, "Hey Mark, your dad was talking about how proud he is of you." I smiled faintly. "Yeah," I said softly. "He always did love an audience." They laughed and left, not realizing how true that was. When I finally got into my car, I didn't feel the need to look back. There was no dramatic closure, no tears, no speeches, just quiet acceptance. I wasn't leaving out of anger anymore. I was simply choosing not to return. Driving out of town, I glanced at the rearview mirror one last time. The place that had once defined my pain grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. I realized then that ghosting them hadn't been revenge, it had been survival. And as the road stretched out before me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace that didn't need to be earned. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's finally deciding whose pain you'll stop carrying and whose silence you'll no longer break.